Hello and welcome to Mythical Entertainment Interviews. I'm your host, Mithrandiel. Today we'll be chatting with the voice of Psycho-Pass's Akane Tsunemori, Kate Oxley. We'll be discussing how she got started in the voice acting industry and dive a bit deeper into the character. Stay tuned.
Excuse me, sorry. Excuse me, do you know where I can find Inspector Ginasa?
Right here. Well, you've got some awful luck to get this assignment your first night on the job.
Inspector Akane Tsunemori reporting for duty, sir. Pleased to meet you, sir. This is my first day.
I know. I'm sorry, but the CID's short on manpower tonight. I don't have time to give you the rookie treatment.
Kate, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, thanks for having me.
You bet. So just to get started, if you wanted to share a little bit about how you got started with voice acting.
Okay, sure. Well, actually, I had graduated from Baylor University with a degree in theater performance and moved back to Dallas-Fort Worth and started doing some theater. And I was doing a show at Casa Manana, which is in Fort Worth, and met Jeremy Inman, who's a friend of a friend and has now become a friend. But he had just started directing at Funimation and was preparing to hold auditions for his first show, which at that time, this was, I think, 12 or 13 years ago, that was Baki the Grappler.
Oh, okay, nice.
And so, I was excited, just out of school, excited about the idea of doing something. I'd never done voiceovers and hadn't really entertained the idea. But of course, it was an exciting thought, as it probably is to most people. And so I went in and auditioned. And at that point, at the point of auditions, even though there were more females in the show, he only had 2 roles to cast.
Mm-hmm.
And I got cast as Nina, who is a young girl in the show. And that's kind of how I got my start working specifically at Funimation.
Nice. And then when you got started with voice acting, was there something that you didn't expect, either positive or negative, when you got started with this? Something that kind of maybe surprised you, or you weren't really expecting?
Well, I think what surprised me is that I think when I would think about someone recording a show or, a series or a film, I would kind of visualize them, sitting on the stool with a microphone and kind of watching the whole show and getting a feel for the show and a feel for the character. And I think what surprised me the most is, when you're in the booth recording a show, typically my experience has been, it's not always the case, but typically you're only seeing 3 seconds before you speak, which is when you're beeped in. So you have a script and you have a monitor. When I first started, we had, paper scripts. Now everything's on screens. You had a script and you had a monitor, and, you really rely on the director to kind of give you enough information to prepare you for what you're about to do without taking the time to explain the whole show. If you're recording an episode that's 20, 30 minutes, actors and directors in the company, they don't have the time to sit and watch it and have a feel for it. So the directors bear the burden of preparing the actor line by line, scene by scene, for what they are to say. So I think I was most surprised that you only get that little snippet right before you speak.
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting, and I think that's what makes directors so valuable, is they have to have that instinct in order to relay it to the actors, which I think is probably one of the reasons a lot of directors are actors and vice versa.
Right. It's funny that you mentioned that, because so I got the chance to interview John Swasey and Morgan Berry, who both did work on The Boy and the Beast.
Yes.
And they were saying how, this is my misconception, right? I'll imagine when you're done recording a movie, you all just get to go in and watch the movie together, and you're like, great, look at this work that we've done. And they were both like, actually, we haven't seen the movie that we're starring in yet.
Yes, actually, I listened to that interview and I kind of laughed at that, because I still have that feeling after doing this for some time now, that hey guys, aren't we gonna like sit around and I think you said like eat some popcorn and check it out? It's kind
Yeah.
of bizarre. Actually, Psychopaths is the first show that I've got to really experience with a true audience in the theaters.
Mm.
I got to go see it in Dallas
Uh-huh.
just a few weeks ago, and it was really cool because you kind of got that kind of button on the end of your work, that sense of, wow, here we all are to celebrate what's happening.
Yeah, and you get to
So,
experience that with the audience, which is awesome because you feed off that energy. Like some people will be like, oh, why do you go to theaters? So many people now they'll stream their movies on Netflix or whatever. Like they don't feel a need to go, but really a big part of it is that energy. So when you're able to go and feel that energy from people who are excited to go see your work, which might only be in the theaters for a couple of weeks or have a
right,
limited release, or especially Funimation's been doing a lot better with releasing them in theaters, but it's not like a wide range release where it's out
right.
for a month at a time. So you get a lot of the energy out of that, which is great.
Yeah, and I don't really have the experience of watching anything I've done with anyone other than, some people in my family who might want to check it out with me.
Yeah,
So, like you said, we're not at group watching parties. I
yeah.
think we
You
had one.
should. You should.
I think years ago for Shin-Chan, we had one.
Mhm.
That was a fun show to work on. But yeah, I don't know why that doesn't happen more. I guess because everyone's just, it's a business and you're on to the next thing. But I don't know. I'm kind of a sentimental person. So your idea, I really like it. I
Yeah,
think we should suggest that.
pass that along. Let them know. So, what would you say has been your most challenging role to date, and why in terms of voice acting?
Well, I think that's kind of a tricky question because there's not really one role that sticks out
Hmm.
um, as the most challenging, but I think different roles are challenging for different reasons.
Hmm.
So I think I could just speak to, I think when I started out doing anime,
Uh-huh.
I was typically cast as young, energetic schoolgirl,
Uh-huh.
and I played Makie Sasaki in Negama,
Uh-huh.
and she's super high energy, and my higher range of my voice, and when you're recording, you're not like I said, you're not watching the whole show, so it's just line after line after line, and having to maintain that super high energy. After recording that for several hours, days at a time, that can
Right.
be challenging because
Yeah.
just
It's
to keep
the
that
it's the
energy up.
physical aspect of it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Just kind of being quote unquote on, just
Mhm.
like really hyped up the whole time. And then I think, several years ago, I started doing some boy voices, young boys, teenage boys,
Mhm.
and that's just such a different placement. Um, that can wear on you physically, like with your vocal cords.
Yeah.
You know, I couldn't do that for as long as I could do something closer to my own voice, which is probably what I typically have been cast in, is not, super character voices, but things that are pretty close to my voice. So having to do something that is so different from my voice, like a boy or Kirihara in Darker Than Black, that was the first role that I had to really try like a lower, more serious placement, and
Mhm.
so that was a challenge to kind of like set my mind in this different spot and keep my keep my body physically, where it needed to be.
Yeah, and it
So
seems like it's kind of like a theme, a recurring theme in terms of voice acting. I mean, you have this idea because in drama, and I've had some experience with acting in the past and things like that. So actors, they'll be like, oh, I had these challenging roles because of entering this specific role or getting into this mindset or whatever. Uh, but in the conversations I've had so far with voice actors, it's more of that physical element, like you're saying, like kind of
yeah,
controlling the tone and controlling the yeah, it's basically like where your pitch and your tone is, and like kind of staying in that character, not just like mentally necessarily, but like making sure your voice is consistent, because an inconsistent voice acting job is a glaring error and definitely something you want to avoid.
sure. And I mean, if you think about, a director holding auditions for actors, I
Hmm.
mean, a director's not going to cast someone in a role that they haven't demonstrated competency in.
Right,
So
right.
it's not like you're coming in to record something that's way out of your element, and you're just like, how am I going to do this for hours on end? Typically directors get to know you, and if anything, you tend to be typecast, and
Right.
so I think it's just a matter of strain on your vocal cords or just keeping up that energy. I mean, I watch some shows that other actors have recorded, and I think, how did they do that? How did they do that lead role with all that energy, hours after hours? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it can be tiring.
Yeah. So on the flip side of that, which role have you had the most fun with? Which one have you enjoyed the most?
Oh man. Well, hmm, which one have I enjoyed the most? Uh, well, I know I hate to not answer
It could
your
be like a top. It
question.
could be like a Letterman, like top 10. No,
Oh,
or just
it's
like
like I
a few.
just didn't answer your previous question, and I'm gonna kind of do that again. I mean, I know it sounds kind of bottled, but I mean, there's different things about each of them that are really exciting.
Uh huh.
I mean, being able to be a significant role in a series like Psychopaths has been really cool.
Yeah.
Because I really like the show,
Yeah.
and I really enjoyed working with the people that worked on it. Um, so Chris George was the engineer, and Zach Bolton was the director.
Mhm.
That as product versus process. As far as the process, that was just such a great experience. And there's been a few roles that I felt were kind of significant milestones, for me, like the first lead that I got, or getting a role that was different than something that I'd normally done, and having a director give me that opportunity. Those are the moments that I think I really that really excite me as an actor. But most recently, I mean, Akane and Psychopath sticks out to me because I've had a great time
Mhm.
on that series.
So kind of sticking with dub work in general, there's been this sub versus dub debate going on pretty much as long as anime's been around in the United States. What do you tell people who insist that they don't enjoy dubbed work? I don't know, like maybe you don't necessarily encounter them at conventions or whatever, but
Right.
they're not like going to your panels and being like, "I hate what you do," but I just
Yeah.
want to say hi.
Yeah.
But do you if you're having conversations with mainly people who are like, "Oh, I prefer subs," is there something that you say, or is there maybe a work that you point to and say, "Hey, here's a really good quality dub. You should check it out." Because I know that you and your colleagues are all doing great work in that dub field, and sometimes it feels like a lot of that's being unnoticed because these people are all saying, "Oh, we prefer subtitles." So I'm just curious if there's something
Yeah.
that you do or say to try and win them over and get them to see that.
Well, not necessarily, but I mean, I will say, if somebody prefers one thing over what I do, I mean, I'm not going to try to convince them that something else is better. People like what they like, and I wouldn't negate, what's there originally. I mean,
Hmm.
what was done in Japan was obviously successful, and therefore that's why we get to do what we do here.
Yeah.
So I understand the love for the original work,
Hmm.
because without it, um,
There
you
wouldn't be
know,
dubbed work, right?
there wouldn't be dub work. So
Exactly.
I would never negate somebody's love for what originally was there, or the original actors, or anything like that. But I do think there's this growing popularity um, in America
Hmm.
for dub work, and I think that has brought focus to anime in general. And because of the large fan base here, I'd like to think that you know we're all kind of rooting for the same thing. We want more work, and we want good work. So I don't know. I guess I tend to look at it as we should be on the same side. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. That's definitely. I think that there are people who definitely have been very vocal about subtitle being superior versus dub being superior, and I'm not necessarily saying like we should force that wedge or divide. I just know some people are kind of on the fence, and so it's like, hey, come check out dubs. It's not as bad as everyone says it is.
Well, it's
You
and
know.
it's a different experience. Of
Yeah.
course, I'm going to say that
Right.
because I I'm an actor, and I speak English, and I enjoy watching things where you can relate differently to a story
Mhm.
when you can understand it, when
Yeah.
you're not just reading it. And,
Right.
you know, I mean, the people that record it in another language originally recorded it in their own language because they intended for the audience to understand what was said, you
Hmm.
know? So there may or may not be a disconnect when you're reading subtitles. But if somebody likes it, more power to them. I mean, hopefully we're all just enjoying it, and hopefully it gets bigger and better so that more and more of it is made everywhere.
Yeah.
That's how I
That's
feel.
the goal, right? Ultimately, for the fans, as long as there's more content out there, I think everybody will be happy. So, okay, and Morgan had a difficult difficulty with this one, and if you want to do a list, that's fine too.
Oh no.
So who is your favorite voice actor and why?
Well, let me try to not do a list,
Okay, you can just
but
call out like a mentor or somebody like you just really love the work they've done, or you like the way they approach it, or something like that. Somebody you look up to, maybe a role model in voice acting for you.
yeah, okay. Well, now that you explain it that way, there's one person that comes to mind, and I don't know if it's a surprise or not that it's not a female; it's a male.
Uh-huh.
And I would say Rob McCullum,
Hmm.
who I've been cast, alongside of in several shows. Actually, most of the significant roles that I've had, he's had a significant role in those shows as well. So I hear his voice a lot. I just love the way his voice sounds. It's got an edge and it's different, but it's really smooth. And I know him personally. I think he's a really good person, and he has a really impressive body of work. And he's helped me out here and there as far as acting goes. And yeah, he's somebody that I would look up to for sure.
Awesome. So moving on to Psychopaths, right? A big project that you've been working on recently. How did you get involved in the Psychopath series specifically?
Well, I've honestly, I feel like I've just been lucky enough to, kind of get my foot in the door at Funimation years ago. I'd have to really figure out how long ago that was, but I believe it was probably 13 years ago. And luckily, when typically when actors are used by Funimation, if directors like their work, then you get called in for more auditions, and if they like your auditions, you continue to get cast. So my experience has been really positive there. And I just keep auditioning and hoping that I get cast. And I would certainly give the credit to the director of Psychopaths, Zach Bolton, who, when I first started voice acting at Funimation, I believe he was the engineer on Baki the Grappler, and then later, as he got promoted to director, most of the shows that I've had, leads on, or larger roles, he's been the director, and I feel like he's given me a lot of chances. I think my first true lead was Momo and Peach Girl, and he directed that. Darker Than Black, that was a significant lead, and also a different kind of voice. And I feel like he really, trusted me and kind of gave me that opportunity. So I think I was just, lucky enough to have been working at Funimation, and have rapport with the people around me, and auditioned for Zach on Psychopaths. And you never really know, at least from my perspective, how big a show is going to be or how it will be received. Even if it's bigger in Japan or it's received well from wherever it's come from.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
I had a
it's hard to know if it'll pan here or if it'll do well. Sometimes there's
sure.
sleeper hits in Japan that just take off here, and vice versa. So yeah.
Sure, and I remember when we did Shin-chan, everybody was saying like this is a big deal because it's a big deal in Japan,
Uh-huh.
and I got to play a smaller part in that, actually a couple smaller parts,
Mhm.
and that was a really fun show. But I don't know. I guess to answer your question, I would just say I got involved because the director and I had worked together, and he chose to cast me in this role. So I just feel really really privileged.
So there, regarding Akane, the character that you voice in Psychopath, there are often discussions about the lack of positive or strong female leads in anime, or that they're typecast, as a certain type of female. Do you feel like Akane is a step in the right direction? And what do you like most about Akane as a character?
Okay. Well, yeah, I think a lot of female voice actors and a lot of actresses in general would feel that there's roles for females are lacking or strong leads are lacking, and I think Akane is a great character. Um, she's a really strong protagonist, but she's also like a really pure good guy. You're
Uh-huh.
you're on her side. You see things through her eyes, and you're kind of on that journey with her. What I like about her, and I feel like I connect with, is that she doesn't just kind of go along with society or go with the flow. I appreciate that she questions everything and decides truth for herself. She doesn't just accept, what the world is saying, what society is saying is good or true. She looks into everything. I think that's important for us to do with our morals or our values, or with my faith. I
Mm.
think it's important that you make it your own. You really question what you believe, and you question what your truth is, so that you have that what's the word I'm looking for,
The
just
foundation is stronger.
yeah, and
Yeah.
just the confidence to know that what you know is true.
Hmm.
So she keeps digging. I mean, she's fearless. She just jumps in there. She keeps checking things out all the way through the film. We see that from her.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really cool quality in her, and that's something that I would hope to emulate in my life. I mean, certainly not to the degree of jumping in
And
war
getting
states.
caused into a conspiracy and everything else.
No,
Yeah.
I'm glad that my life is a lot simpler than that. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think she's a really great protagonist, and yeah, I would hope to see more roles like her.
Great. In terms of going back to the logistics just briefly here, when you're doing voice acting for a movie, is it much different than when you're doing the voice acting for the TV series? Because you also voiced Akane in the TV series. Was that process, very similar? Was it different, or how was that?
Oh, I would say it was very similar. I
Okay.
mean, uh, same same people, same room.
Yeah.
Uh,
Nothing
it's
fancy. Not in like
same
you're like,
setup.
oh, this is a nicer microphone than usual, or anything like that. Just
I don't
same
think
general
so.
setup.
I don't think so. I mean,
Okay.
of course, there's a buzz. You're excited
Yeah.
because you're doing the film, and I mean, I feel like everybody there just feels lucky to be there doing. You're making cartoons for a living. It's super fun, but
Right.
when you're working on a film that's resulted from several seasons of a series, it's exciting. So, um, but as far as the process, um, I don't recall things being much different.
Well, it's good to know. Like I said,
It's
these interviews are really enlightening for me too, because I have all these preconceptions about what that looks like, and so for some reason I just imagine like, oh, when you're recording for a TV show, it's like this, but for a movie, it's like this. But
no,
same studio, same general process.
yeah,
Uh,
basically, yeah.
that's awesome. Um, okay, so finally, just to wrap things up, so convention season is officially here. Are you going to be at any cons coming up, or are there any projects that you're working on that you'd like to share?
Well, unfortunately, I don't have any projects to share. So I'm hoping to get some
Okay.
projects to share.
You're like, maybe next
Um,
time I'll have something
yeah,
for you.
hopefully. But I will be at a convention in Florida later this month in April. It's Florida Anime Experience. That's the end of April, April 22nd through 24th. So that'll be my first time in Florida. So I'm excited about that.
Cool.
And then there's been some talks about some other ones, but nothing's finalized yet. So
All right. Well, we will keep an eye out and see where else you might be in the coming months, and definitely keep an ear and eye out for future projects coming from you.
thank you.
All right. Well, thank you again, Kate. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. Thanks a lot.
You bet.